Hello and welcome to Rando Rob. Each week on Rando Rob, I'll be showing and discussing one item from my large collection of collections. New shows appear every Monday, and throughout the week, I'll be adding older episodes of Rando Rob that were previously only available to my Patreon subscribers. You can watch episodes of Rando Rob on YouTube at youtube.com/Rob O'Hara. Just look for the Rando Rob playlist. Audio versions of the show are available on my website at podcast.robohara.com or through iTunes. Just search for Rando Rob. Thanks for watching or listening, and I hope you enjoy this vintage episode of Rando Rob.
So when I came in, I actually kind of forgot that today was my day to do Rando Rob. And as I said before, the problem is not finding an item to talk about. The problem is narrowing down an item to talk about. I could literally go around with my phone and just start picking up things and talk for 2 weeks about things just in this room. I could probably talk for a week on things that are in the very first on that first shelf right there. So it's literally just looking at things and picking an item and thinking, well, there's something that has a little story to it or something that might be interesting. And so the item that I'm going to show you on first glance probably won't look very interesting, and it is this can of Dr. Pepper. Now I'm just kind of showing it to you, moving it for a second, because the idea is, if you saw this, you would think, well, that's just a can of Dr. Pepper. Now, if you look at it a little bit more closely, now I don't drink Dr. Pepper anymore, but I'm leaning over here because, nope, that's one of the kids came in here earlier and left a can, but it was not Dr. Pepper, it was Sprite. But if you look at this can, you'll notice that it's a little bit older, that the logo, I think, is a older Dr. Pepper logo here. So it looks a little bit different than a normal or modern, I guess, can of Dr. Pepper. So you might be thinking, like, well, why is Rob saving this old can of Dr. Pepper? But of course, in Robland, this is not a normal can of Dr. Pepper. The top of this can, as you can see, screws off, and it is a secret hiding place. Look at that. It's even insulated here, and the insulation is so you can put something inside the can and then put it in a refrigerator or something, and then what's inside would not freeze or get cold. I'm sure you could probably even put this in a freezer, although a thief breaking into your home might think, well, why is there a can of pop in the freezer that hasn't exploded? So I got this can of Dr. Pepper sometime in the late 90s. And I can tell you that because I started with the Federal Aviation Administration in 1995, and in 96 I accepted a position in Spokane, Washington. So I moved from Oklahoma to Spokane, and I was there for about a year and a half, and then I came back. And so anyway, when I came back home to Oklahoma in 98, I went back to work, and I was working with my old friends and some new friends, and we would go out to lunch almost every day. But there was one particular place that we would go to once a week, maybe, I'd say, maybe every other week. But it was called Ponchos. Now, I've talked about Ponchos on You Don't Know Flat. Ponchos is a restaurant that began in Texas, and there weren't that many locations, I don't think, but there were several in Texas, and there were a few in Oklahoma. But Ponchos is a Mexican restaurant where you would walk in. It was almost cafeteria style. You would walk in to the restaurant, and you picked up a tray, and you walked down, and there were servers on the other side of a glass serving area, and they would serve you, you would say, like, oh, I want beans, I want rice, I want these enchiladas, I want a taco. I mean, you could make this giant mound of food, whatever. It was one price for all you can eat. And then when you got to the end of the line, you paid for a drink and a lunch, and it was, gosh, I don't know, it was definitely less than $10. It was probably $7 or $8 for lunch, and then you would go find a seat, go sit down and eat all this giant thing of food. But their gimmick, I guess, was as you were eating, if you decided you wanted more food or something else or refill or anything, all the tables had these little flags, and you would raise the flag. I had a little flag of Mexico, and you would raise the flag up on the flagpole, and the minute the flag was up, a waitress would come running to your table. What do you need, sir? Well, I'd like 2 more tacos. I'm on it. And she would leave, and a minute later she would come back with 2 tacos. So you didn't get up once you had sat down if you wanted a refill or more food or anything like that. Again, it was all you could eat for one price. So you just raise that flag, and they would come over. So I know you're probably thinking, why is Rob talking about Ponchos? Well, because Ponchos was located next to a place that had a big sign that opened up next door, and it was called the Spy Store. And so, we would go to Ponchos, and this new store opened next door called the Spy Store, and it was like it was kind of like a strip mall, and then Ponchos was like the end anchor kind of big, restaurant on the end, but it was attached to this strip mall thing. And so after lunch one day, we went over to the Spy Store, and it was all the kind of gimmicks that, if you've never been into one of these places, all kinds of, lots of stun guns, lots of, weapons like brass knuckles and things like that. There was an entire book section, and I would say maybe a third of them looked like books that you would get from a bookstore, like bound with a proper cover and a laminate cover. They were old softback books. But the other 2/3 looked like things that someone had printed out on a laser printer and just had bound, how to conceal your identity, how to live off the grid, all those kinds of books. And I'm sure they just, had them printed at Kinko's. And they weren't that expensive, but it was all, it was kind of interesting. They had a lot of security camera stuff, and hidden cameras. They had, I remember they had those sunglasses that are supposed to allow you to see behind you, and they stick out a little bit past, and they're kind of mirrored on the outside, so you can look in the reflection and see people behind you or whatever, if that's a problem in your life. I always thought about, if I were going exercising and going walking around the neighborhood or something, I'm always worried a car or somebody's going to come up behind me or somebody on a bicycle is going to clip me. And so I always thought those glasses would be handy to see people coming behind me, but I never owned any. But then they had this whole section of household items that were all just like this Dr. Pepper can, that all had concealed compartments. I remember they had a thing of spray starch, and you could obviously leave that by your ironing board or something like that. They had all kinds of things. The fake books, if you've ever seen a fake book that has that's hollowed out and that you could open the cover on and put money or valuables or something like that in there. And the problem with a lot of those things is they look out of place. Like, people buy those fake books, and then they just leave them on their desk. Or the books, a lot of the ones that you buy don't look like real books. Like, they don't have a title on the spine, or they look, and some people put them with modern books, and it just kind of stands out. It doesn't, it doesn't blend in. Obviously, the idea is that you're trying to hide in plain sight a place where you have hidden valuables, so that if your house gets robbed, or I always used to think about your hotel room. Like, if you took things, if you had something in a hotel room and you were on travel, you could put things in this little in a book or whatever, and if somebody came in, they were rapidly going through your things, because a lot of thieves, crimes like that, they're in a hurry, they don't want to get caught, so they're looking quickly at things. Of course, in the movies, when you see the spies, thing about thieves, burglars, is that they're not really worried about they can be worried about making noise, but they're not worried about making a mess. So if they're looking for something hidden, they'll just push your bookcase over and see if there's anything behind it. It's just not they're not worried about making a mess. They want to be quick and get out of there, So Anyway, when I saw the Dr. Pepper can, I was a big Dr. Pepper drinker. I don't drink soda anymore. I actually, I'm not supposed to drink anything that's carbonated, but unfortunately, beer is carbonated, so I do still drink at least one carbonated beverage, but I don't drink soda anymore. And back when I was working this job at the FAA, I would, I still work at the FAA, but when I was this particular job back then, I was drinking 4 20-ounce bottles of soda of Dr. Pepper every day. And if you look, that's 250 calories per bottle. So I would drink one with breakfast. I would drink one with my lunch. I would drink one in the afternoon sometime, and then I would drink one with dinner. So I was drinking 4 20 ounces, and they were not diet Dr. Pepper, they were regular Dr. Pepper. So at 250 calories each, that was an extra 1,000 calories a day. And just it wasn't good, but of course it adds up. But the point of that is that I frequently at my desk at home and my desk at work would have bottles or cans of Dr. Pepper laying around. And so when I saw this, I thought, the cans that I had this exact same logo on them, and I could take this and essentially hide it in plain sight. I could put, I used to put money in it. And so I started doing a thing a long time ago, like when we would go to the casino. I had started with a bankroll. And when I say bankroll, I want you to know that meant like $200. Not like, I'm not some big high roller guy, but over time that money went up. It increased. We would bet a little bit, but I don't want to keep taking money out of like my bank account to go to the casino, right? I wanted to have this little separate fund. We call it, a slush fund or whatever for the casino. And so I would keep it in this can. And so I would just take off when I come home. I would take it and roll my bills all up and put them down in there. And that's what I did. So I don't really use this anymore. I don't have cash laying around, and I don't have anything that I need to hide from anybody. So I don't really use it. One thing I don't think I mentioned, but as I showed, if you look inside here, that insulation thing, there are some minor dents in the can. I'm going to hold this up here just so you can see from it being dropped at different times or whatever. But overall, if you sit here and knock on it, it's very, very solid because that thing that's inside there. So obviously, and most of the dents are around the top area too, which I'm going to look here, but yeah, maybe that top part of that little thing doesn't go all the way to the top there. It kind of tapers in. So that might explain why all the dents are in that area. But the sides of this thing are just solid. Like, I feel like I could put this sideways and stand on it. I'm not going to try that right now. That might be in video number 4 if I don't find something else to talk about. But yeah, so this is the Dr. Pepper safe, and it's funny because when other people come into my room, when my buddies come over, this or that, I'm sure when they see something like the handheld scanner that I showed off, or any of the million things that are laying here, they'll pick it up and they'll say, what's the story about this? What's the deal with that? What's the deal with this tiny version of Mr. Potato Head that looks like R2-D2? So there's all these things that are interesting, but nobody has ever come in here and picked up this can of Dr. Pepper and said, hey, what's new with this can of Dr. Pepper? Because it just kind of blends into the background, which is the idea. So this normally sits right over here on the shelf next to a couple of other, like a little change jar thing, and a couple things, and nobody's ever asked about it, nobody's ever seen it. So that's exactly what it's supposed to do, is hide itself in plain sight. So I don't think there are too many people right now on my 16-bit Patreon feed. So if my house ever gets broken into and this can has been disturbed, I know who to come for. It's one of you guys. Anyway, hey, thanks for your support. I greatly appreciate you guys, and I will be back next week with another random item from the room. Thanks, everyone.